Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to Red Eagle Politics. Make sure to like this video down below and subscribe to the channel if you are new. So Joe Biden supposedly came in as a uniter, according to his own words and the mainstream media's words. However, a new poll from a relatively establishmentarian left-leaning source shows that the U.S. is not only more divided than ever, because we pretty much know that by now, but a majority of Trump supporters and a very significant minority of Joe Biden supporters want a national divorce. They want red states, essentially, and blue states to split up and become their own entities. And this is a very interesting proposition. This is talking about a peaceful national divorce. I have a disclaimer, a peaceful divorce. And we could talk about if this thing would work, if it would be a good idea, if it's really going to happen, and what is really driving the polarization. We're going to get to all this and more because I think it's important that we discuss it. But first, I have to tell you guys about my good friends over at Noble Gold. Now, if you've been keeping up with the news, even if you haven't, you might have heard the word tapering being used quite a bit. It's the new Fed buzzword, and you'll hear all kinds of meanings for it. But what it really means is Washington has to repay around $30 trillion that it's borrowed. And could you guess where that's going to come from? It's going to come from you. It's going to come from your pockets. Janet Yellen says we've never seen another financial crisis in our lifetimes when she ran the Fed. Now, 4 years later, she is warning of a catastrophe, and here we are. Our friends at Noble Gold, however, can keep you safe from this and protect you, whatever happens next. By starting a precious metals IRA or 401k, you can fight the coming wave of inflation and ride out the storm with your savings intact. And as a bonus and a thank you, you'll get a free 5-ounce solid silver America the Beautiful coin with each qualifying plan you start this month. Visit noblegoldinvestments.com or call at 877-646-5347. Again, noblegoldinvestments.com. So right here, this is from the New York Post, this article here, and there's also all sorts of articles. I think Newsweek also covered this story. But Joe Biden, again, supposedly coming in as a uniter, but more than half of all voters who backed Donald Trump, I think it was 52% of Trump voters and 41% of Biden voters, want this country to split up in a national divorce. They want red states and blue states to peacefully break off and separate and form their own governments because we are so divided right now. And 25% of Trump voters say they strongly agree with the idea of a red state secession. 18% of Biden voters also want the same thing to happen. And honestly, I could easily see these numbers flipped if Donald Trump was in office. Obviously, Biden supporters will be less likely to support some form of secession because right now, Democrats control the presidency, they control the House, they control the Senate barely. They can't get anything done, but they still have the control. So that's probably why Trump voters are more likely to want a peaceful separation, but also because our government seems to be, and it's not just relatively to Joe Biden being there. I mean, they're more emboldened with Biden being there, but these corporations moving so far to the left when it comes to social issues, when it comes to the government targeting Trump supporters, when you have Democrats in office, especially Biden in particular. But even beforehand, it wasn't like the Justice Department was really in Trump's corner, even though Donald Trump was running the government. He had a lot of swamp around him, and many people he didn't even know were swamp around him. So the swamp runs deep, it truly does. But that's kind of why you see more right-wingers supporting a peaceful separation than left-wingers. But still, really don't be fooled. It's pretty evident that the establishment's turn to the left has really caused this divide. The Overton window in this country has shifted so far to the left. You cannot be denying this. Economically, we're not really talking about that because maybe, yes, on some economic issues since the 1950s, we have technically moved right in terms of the Overton window. But when it comes down to social issues, we're moving so far to the left that a good chunk of Republicans now support gay marriage, and a good majority of Democrats wanted it to be banned around 20 years ago, for example. You see this here from Bernie Sanders saying all lives matter in 2015 to the point where if you say all lives matter, it's you're racist, you're a white supremacist if you say that. So this is how we've moved so far to the left, and social media has really done this too. Because before social media, you didn't have the division that we have today. Without the social media influence and people engaging in sensational culture and taking things out of context, for example, like police interactions, BLM would not exist, because usually when they release the full body camera footage, it shows an entirely different thing. So people that really shouldn't be getting involved with media are getting involved, and they're doing it to their own detriment. It's driving polarization, obviously, in this country. It is true that there are some like right-wing sensational boomer stuff as well that have, come into light because of social media. But either way, it seems as if most people have been moving to the left on social issues, even within the Republican ranks, when it comes down to things like social media. Now, some people are starting to wake up now, but a lot of those people's voices are being censored and they're being stifled, and their views are trying to be pushed out of the Overton window by the establishment as well, which also has driven the polarization, and it's also driven the Overton window further to the left in terms of what's talked about in mainstream discourse, even compared to 5 years ago, when people like Alex Jones used to have a platform on YouTube of millions of people. Now that's gone, and it doesn't stop with Alex Jones. Pretty much all anti-establishment voices will be censored within around 5 years or so, which is only going to further drive the polarization. But when it comes to a national divorce, I wanted to talk about Viability, because this is our election map, county-wise. Republicans always, typically in recent years, have been a more rural party. They do fairly well in the rural areas of the country and have a lot more of the land. However, even in states that are heavily Republican, like Nebraska or Kansas, for example, or Indiana, there are still the major cities that typically do vote Democrat, which also would pose an issue. Because how are you going to have a national divorce when a good deal of people in one country just hate you, essentially, and vice versa? Because you're going to have Democrats that live in red states, and you're going to have Republicans that live in blue states, to the point where it's not viable unless everybody agrees to move. But economically speaking, how is it viable? Republicans are far more likely to live in rural areas. Will there potentially be an embargo of things like crops and things like that? A lot of farmers are Republican. However, on the other hand, a lot of these corporate boardrooms are becoming increasingly Democrat. So people will have to move out of cities. And yeah, there's still Republicans that live in cities, but Republicans typically prefer to live in rural areas or exurban areas. And honestly, I don't like that, honestly. I think that we need people that do live in rural areas, but we also need cultural centers. I mean, the largest city with a Republican mayor is Fort Worth, and even then, Fort Worth, Texas, it's essentially the little brother of Dallas. And even then, it's become increasingly Democratic over the past 30 years or so as well, which is a problem in my opinion. You do need right-wing cultural centers if you ever want this to work, because that's the only way it's going to be viable. Cities are places that really do need to have a strong right-leaning presence, because that's really what's determinant of culture. Typically, when you have a lot of people that come together. The left doesn't like right-wingers even doing that. In many cases on social media. They don't like it. They don't like that because they know that it challenges their cultural grasp that they have on power. So that's important to take into consideration. It's not viable from an economic perspective or a land perspective unless there are serious changes to American geography. And even if it does happen, you're going to have a lot of angry people. So you might have like a bunch of Chazes popping up all over the place. Across like Omaha, for example, and you might even have the opposite thing happening in like rural Oregon or rural California. So you would have to change the map up significantly if you wanted this to work, because it just seems as if, geographically speaking, it's not the most viable. Because you do have a lot of Democrats that are concentrated in the cities, in the cultural centers of places such as like Nashville, Tennessee, or Louisville, Kentucky, for example, in states that are otherwise very heavily Republican areas. And also, what exactly would this mean? Like, the Republican Party and the Democrat Party, they may seem like they are polarized, but at the same time, they seem to have this uniparty global agenda in both parties. And obviously, Donald Trump decided to try to stick a fork in the Republicans' agenda when it comes to things like free trade and intervention, but still, not enough really has changed to the point where the current elites within the Republican Party have really shifted that much on it. Obviously, the Overton Window shifted. I think a lot of people, the people actually have a very different worldview, but still the Republican Party has not been remade entirely for it to work. And there's so many people that are delusional that think that, oh, you know, we're still in the 1960s and we need to compromise, right? There's so many people that still have that mindset, and it's such a defeatist mindset too. And it's just so far removed from reality. So many of these people just hate you. They want you gone, which is also the reason why it's not going to work, because they also want to control you. And that's the biggest takeaway from this. Why a national divorce is not going to work is because the left will want to control you. And that's another one of the reasons why the left less likely to support this than the right, because they specifically would rather exert their power and control over you and make you fall in line with their agenda, with the agenda of the establishment. And that's really why it's not going to work. There are a lot of people that have woken up, but I don't think a peaceful divorce is really that viable. But maybe in 20 years from now, a lot could change and we might see that happen. Maybe a good chunk, if the GOP does end up becoming like a regional party, as many people have expected. I don't think it will. I think that I'm more white-pilled on that fact. I think that they still will remain viable, but sadly they may end up moving to the left to do it, and a lot of people will, which is arguably worse than becoming a regional party in many cases. But if they do become a regional party, then maybe you will see a Republican-like chunk of the nation, maybe like Missouri, Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska, and like the Mountain West and the Pacific Northwest, like besides like Seattle and Portland, of course. Maybe they will form their own nation, but I don't know what's going to happen, guys. A national divorce, I don't think we're really there yet, but this is really a path that we're on that we shouldn't be on when it comes to polarization, and it's pretty much all the fault of the left, by the way. The right has this mindset of we just want to be left alone, we just want to drink beer, grill steaks, watch football on Sundays, and that's great. Obviously, we like to have that mindset too. But the problem is you just can't do that right now, and the left doesn't want to really let you do that to begin with. So that's why I don't even think a national divorce is even something the left would agree upon, because they want everybody to fall in line with their agenda. So that's really where we're at right now. Our nation is in a dark place at the moment. The dark winter, as Joe Biden put it, even though it's not winter, it's arguably here, and we're growing more divided now than ever with Biden. It seemed like Donald Trump was like somebody who a lot of people said was divisive, a divisive character, but it seems as if when Biden's in office, it seems like the divide continues to grow. But I think a lot of people on the right are waking up, and if we can get a competent right-wing government in power that actually answers to the will of the American people, then maybe, just maybe our nation could be saved. But there's a long way to go, and we got to keep fighting. So anyways, guys, thanks for watching this video. Please like this video down below, comment down below, and subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell for notifications so you never miss another video. Follow me on social media. The links are all in the description below. As always, guys, thanks for watching. Red Eagle, out.